My name is Joel Bolnick, and I'm the Managing Director of the SDI Secretariat. I first came to Kenya in 1995. Well, in order to tell you a bit about my first visit in 95, I have to go back a little bit. And the first date that I would focus on is 1991, where we held a conference for slum dwellers in Johannesburg, South Africa. And it was just after the unbanning of the political parties and the freeing of the political prisoners. It was when Mandela reappeared after years in prison. And there had been a cultural boycott for decades in South Africa. We took advantage of the end of the cultural boycott and we invited a number of people from all over the world to attend this conference. And it included people who came from the Philippines. A guy by the name of Dennis Murphy, who is a famous community organizer in Manila in the Philippines. And on his way back from this conference, he stopped in Nairobi. And he offered a number of young Kenyans, through an organization called APACAN, the opportunity of being trained in community organizing, which was a methodology borrowed from, of all places, the United States. And over a number of years, Dennis Murphy and some of his colleagues provided this training to a few Kenyans, and they included people like Joseph Kimani and Salma Sheba and Lawrence Appeal. There were maybe one or two others that I don't recall, who later on became the program officers for Pamoja Trust. Then the next date would be 1995. Before I got here, we held a conference on urban land challenges in South Africa, and we held it in a slum in one of South Africa's major cities. And again, we invited a number of international people, and we'd heard about this amazing lawyer in Nairobi who had regularly gone to court to stop land grabbing, who'd never won a single court case, but who'd prevented lots of land grabbing. And her name was Jane Weru. And we invited Jane, who then worked for an NGO called Kitua Chasheria, to come for this conference. And she attended this conference. Jane, as always, didn't give anything away, and by the time she left, we had no idea whether she thought that the engagement with us was worthwhile or a total waste of time. And then she disappeared from our lives. But a funder who funded our program had been at that conference, and he'd been speaking to Jane, and he offered to support her around some of her work around community organizing. And so through Kitua Chasheria, she received funding to continue the work. And it was in that light that I was invited here in 1995. So who did I meet? I met Jane Weru, I met Lawrence Apiu, I met Selma, I met Kim, and a few other community organizers at that time. Itao, those are the ones that I recall. As a country, I had had long dreams and aspirations to visit here. It was kind of the reverse of the situation that I mentioned at the beginning. Just like non-South Africans never traveled to my country, South Africans were not allowed to travel to African countries until the unbanning of the organization. So it was a dream come true. I spent a fair amount of time in Nairobi, and it might have been sort of different in the sense that the climate was a bit different and some of the cultural elements were a bit different, but I could just as easily have been visiting any other Southern African country, because what I did there is what I do in most Southern African countries. Stay in relatively easily accessible hotels, spend time with professionals, go to government departments, visit slums. And all those instruments look pretty much the same wherever you go.